Okay, this is the recording session from the Wind Ensemble we did the other day. I had mic'd the bass, or had a direct input from the bass that was closest to us. So the one double bass, Billy's double bass, is going direct in. And that was because I knew that I probably would want to bring in a little bit of low end under everything else. So I got that. He also had an electric bass, so I recorded that on a different track. You'll see there, electric bass. Then the bass drum, we had the AKG or D112, AKG D112 mic on the bass drum, which is a pretty typical kick drum mic that's used. So we had that there. Then we had two MD421 microphones on the four timpanis. We had one in between each of the two sets of timpanis. I don't know if you guys remember that part. Then we had two Neumanns up overhead, a spaced pair, meaning they were far apart from each other, and they were in cardioid pattern facing the symphony. And these Neumanns were a spaced pair. I have no idea what B and C mean, or why I would have written B and C. Spaced pair, and if you remember, I was talking about there's phase cancellation between those two, and I'll show you that here in a second. It actually shows up here on the screen. You can see it. Because a waveform hits this one as it's going up, and that same wave hits this one as it's going, when it's going down. You put the two together, and they cancel each other out. Okay, that's a problem. Then we had the two ribbon mics. They were in among the instruments. Remember, they were just over the heads of some of the players. The problem there's no phase cancellation because they're at the exact same axis, but now we're closer to some of the instruments than the other ones, right? We're not equidistant. We couldn't get the mic where we wanted. We wanted a mic about halfway in between halfway between the Neumanns and these ribbon mics. Okay. This was the track that they played back for the very last piece right here. So I added that as an audio file. And then one of the things that I always try to teach people is how to do pre-roll and post-roll, which means you start the tape before they start recording, and when they stop, you let it roll for a while in case something happens. But no, your teacher kept stopping the tape right as the applause was going. When people start clapping, it's like, yay, 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 got cut off. So I had to go find some applause online and add some additional applause. So now the audience sounds huge. Actually, I didn't have to go online. There was a loop for it. I could have made it sound like a stadium. So what you see here now are each of the 5 tracks we did. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the biggest issue I had, which I shared with you, was that when that bass drum and cymbals hit, it was so much louder than everything else. How do I clamp that down and keep that sound from being so loud without squishing all the other sound, right? Anyone have an idea what tool I might use for that? Threshold on a what? Yeah, but what kind of compressor? I want to leave everything here alone. I want to hack off that top part really strong. Remember, so you start to square it off, yes. We'd call that a limiter, right? So a really strong compressor where it doesn't subtly reduce the sound, where it really hacks it down, is called a limiter. Sorry?
Adaptive limiter?
Well, what the adaptive limiter does is, instead of you bringing the threshold down, you bring the level up, and it will crush it at the top. So you keep bringing it louder and louder. It's the input gain that you're cranking up on the adaptive limiter, okay? As opposed to bringing the threshold down and then doing a makeup gain afterwards. Does that make sense? Ultimately, they do the same thing. Just one's got an easier knob. You just change the input. And you'll see some compressors like that. Some of them you just change the input level. Some of them you change the threshold level. Okay. So if we go in here and we take a quick look, I'm going to zoom in and just show you the problem spots. Actually, this song had the worst problem spots right here. I'm just going to go in and look at the overhead microphones like this. And you'll see that we've got a lot of quiet sounds, and then we've got something like that. And you can see how much huger that is, especially if I expand it a little bit. Oops, not that much. I think I can go plus. Nope. Get a level. This is so much bigger here. than the average sound going on. It's really going to cause problems. It's going to blow speakers out. It's just going to be overtaking. But if you look, that's mixed in with the Neumann mic there. So I'm just like, what am I going to do? So I'm going to put a limiter on that, but I want it to limit only the frequencies that the bass, fortunately, the bass drum and the cymbal are hitting. Okay, that's what's so loud there, the bass drum and the cymbal. And fortunately, the cymbal is really high and the bass drum is really low. So how did I tackle this problem? Well, I'll show you. I'm going to switch over now, and I'm just going to look at this. I'm going to go ahead and solo these two right here. Okay, these two tracks. Okay. I'm going to come right here, and we might as well use. Yeah, maybe. Let's see. Reverb is much louder in here than on my system. So, okay. So right here, I've got this problem, and I'm gonna show you what I tried to do with it. I wanted to crush down that overloading signal, but I didn't want it to affect the things that I had mic'd independently. So over here, I have the bass, I have the electric bass, the bass drum, the timpanis, all here separately. So I sent those directly to the stereo out. Then I did this thing with these other four, the Neumanns and the ribbon mics, and I routed them. This I haven't shown you yet, but here we are. I routed them to what's called a bus. A bus is a sub-mix. Okay? Anytime you mix two signals together, it's called a bus. This right here is the stereo bus, the two bus, or the master bus, we call it right here. Okay? So instead of routing these to the stereo bus, I routed them to bus 1. And you do that simply by clicking on it. Clicking and holding on it, and you can pick a bus, and I just picked bus 1. And as soon as I picked bus 1, watch, I can show you here if I pick bus 3, it'll create the bus right here. Okay, it creates it for me. Okay, if I go back there now and put that back to bus 1, it'll go back to the bus. Then I went over and I named the bus. So if you click right here, double click on it, I can name it stereo mics. So I named that stereo mics. Okay. Okay. And now it looks like it's going to keep my bus 3 even though I got rid of it, but that's okay. Oh, I can delete it. Great. So I routed all the mics to bus 1 and called it stereo mics, and now when I mute that channel, it kills it. Right? That's all 4 mics put together there. So this is where I wanted to start. My idea was to get these 4 mics working together and then bring in these supplemental mics later, right? These supplemental instruments later to fill in around it. So I came over here and I was like, well, let me see what's going on. So I'll mute that for a second. And let me unmute. Oh, you see that hit right there? Right down around 100 to 200 hertz. Let me play it again. I used the equalizing analyzer. That's hitting really hard there between about 80 hertz and 200. About 200. I can see that. That's the bass drum. That's not the direct bass drum. That's the bass drum that's mixed in with the microphones. Okay, it's very loud. I wanted to turn that down. So what did I do? Well, I got this thing called multipressor. I wish to God the multipressor had a analyzer on it, a graphic EQ. That would make life so much easier, because now I had to have this graphic EQ open here. In the background, so I could see the response and start doing multipressor. What is multipressor? Well, it is a compressor with 4 different bands on it, meaning it can compress low frequency, mid-low, mid-high, and high frequency separately. That make sense? Okay. So I'm not a fan of EQ. In fact, I did this mix with no EQ again. But I have had to use this compressor, and I'm not trying to make the song sound better with the compressor. I'm trying to fix a dang problem. I'm trying to fix a dang problem, which is what compressors were there for originally, right? And that's what I say, fix a problem or do it for effect, but it doesn't make it sound better, right? You might like the effect, then use it, that's great. But I'm not improving the sound of this mix with this. I am just trying to solve that problem of that bass drum hitting way too hard, okay? So if you look here, I set the crossover, which is the band where the compressor kicks on, the compressor distinguishes between its frequencies right at 76, which was right where the low frequency, right here, and I went up to about 200, 240. I went up a little higher than that, okay? And what I can do is I can bypass these bands, and I'm going to turn the multipressor on, and what's going to happen now is you're going to see it compressing just that one band where that kick drum is. Now, it doesn't show a whole lot over here in the EQ. Let's see. Oh, it does, though. You can see it. Watch how much less this goes up right here. It's only going up to about there, right? If I turn this off, see how much higher it goes? You see how much higher it went? I'm reducing it maybe up to 7 to 10 decibels. I'm reducing that a lot. Way more than I want to reduce anything else. I just want to hit that one thing and pull it out. When I compress that frequency, it compresses all the frequencies, not just the kick. It's compressing everything else that's playing at that frequency at the same time. It's screwing up the overall sound because now I'm taking part of it and going, right? So things are stretching, phase cancellations are happening and all this stuff. But I'm saying it's worth it. It's worth it. It was just too pokey before. It was going to blow up my speakers. I had to pull that out. Yeah? It's total compromise, right? Yeah. What I've decided in this song was those 20 or 30 spots where they hit that kick drum or that bass drum and the cymbals way too loud. I'm going to make the song sound worse there so that the rest of the songs can sound better. Yep. Yep. So I set here, I have a pretty low threshold of -27. I have a very high ratio. It's a limiter. It's at 30 to 1. Every 30 steps it goes over, or 30 dB goes over, I'm only going to go to 1. It's basically just hacking it right off. I'm not being very nice to it. I have a very fast attack, meaning as soon as that bass drum sound comes in, I'm capping it off, and I have a very quick release because as soon as that bass drum is over, I want to get right back to the music. I'm just trying to suck that thing out of there. Some important things on compressors. Make sure your auto gain is off on this one. Or you know what your auto gain is doing. If I turn on auto gain on this, it does some weird stuff. Let's see here. Oops. Look at that. See, it's cranking up too because it's saying, well, if you're going to compress it that much, you must need this much more level. I don't want auto gain on this one because I don't want to A/B this and hear the exact same level. I actually want to reduce the level in a part of it, right? In a section of it. So the auto gain is something to pay attention to. Look ahead means rather than it reacting to the signal, it's looking at the signal ahead of time. We couldn't do this in the analog world. It's looking at the signal ahead of time and saying, oop, here comes that big bass drum, turn it down now. Right? It's ready for it when it comes in. Obviously, if we set the attack to 0, then it would suck it out all the way. I left 2 milliseconds because I didn't want to click or pop at the beginning of it where the attack portion is too short. Right? It can make it sound like a click. And then I set my output to 0. So I'm just trying to suck out that bass. Questions on that?
What does output do?
This would just turn the whole thing up on the way out. Most plugins have some sort of level on them that you can automate or whatever you need to. Yes?
Is there something you should worry about, like look ahead time, less time versus more time?
If I wanted to put this at 0 milliseconds, I don't know why you'd want much more than 5. I'm not sure. No, I don't know why you'd want more than 5 milliseconds. Seems like a computer is fast enough. It would react to that pretty quickly, you know?
Probably put like, what, 3 to 5 is an arbitrary number?
I left what it did. Oh, so whenever I use these plugins, I open it up, and whatever the default is, I go with that and make changes as I need to. What I find when I'm working in compressors is I really need to understand the auto gain if I want the auto gain on or off. And understand that I'm not boosting something. Because what happens is your ear will hear louder is better, right? When you go A/B, louder sounds better. Not really, because you forget people can just turn the volume up on theirs. So when you're usually adding a compressor, I say put the auto gain on so it maintains the same level. It just gives you the compressed versus non-compressed. In this one, I'm not trying to compress. I'm not trying to bring up the overall level. I'm trying to just squash out a sound. So I actually do want it cut. I do want it cut. Okay, I want to reduce that volume right there. Other questions? All right. The other place that I had the problem was the cymbals. And I'll just show you a couple of those. Let me go back here. I think they were right in here. Oops. Ah. That's killing me, right? Killing me. You hear how harsh that is, right? Especially on these speakers. And I even talked to Greg beforehand. I'm like, is there any way we can get the cymbal player to play? And he's like, well, cymbals are just loud. I'm like, he was walking on stage, so I totally understood it. But if we were to try to do a recording with these people, we'd say, cymbal player, you got to come down a little bit. You got to come, got to hit those a little bit lighter. So what did I have to do there? Well, I did the exact same thing. I went in. Let me see if I can see the cymbals here on the compressor or on the analyzer. Here, see it there? Right there. So I could see that starting at about 5K and above is that psh, psh sound. So guess what I did? I went over to the multipressor. I set it about, I'll bring it down a little bit maybe, 4700K, and I turned on a compressor at the top. I didn't limit it quite as much in this one. I don't know why, because I didn't feel like it. I don't know. I tried to limit as little as possible. That's when I started here, I was at an 8. I started at an 8-to-1. 8-to-1 is usually the point where you can consider it limiting, and I ended up at 30-to-1. Right, I kept cranking it up. Whether it needs to be that high, I'm not quite sure. But here, I started at 8-to-1, and I ended up at about 12-to-1. I have that same really quick attack, but because the cymbal lasts longer, I had a slower release. I ended up with about a 400 millisecond release. How did I decide that? I watched the limiter, I watched the reduction, and when it stopped reducing, about the time I stopped hearing the cymbal seemed about right. Okay, so here it is without this, and here it is with the cymbal. Not huge, but enough. And back off. Hear it? Back on. Keeps that really high part. It's still too loud. It's still too loud in the mix, and there's nothing I can do about it. It's all mixed in with the trumpets and everything. But that really high piercing part where it's going to jerk you out of the song, I tried to reduce out. Questions on that? Okay, well, I found the same thing on the very low bass. I had to have a little bit on the low. You'll see I have a little bit happening on the low. I didn't want to take as much of the low out, but it was still a little too boomy. You cannot hear it at all on these speakers. And then what I found in the mid was that sometimes my brass sound was getting a little pokey and bouncy and a little harsh. So I put just a little bit on here, and you'll see that I am only compressing slightly in the mid to just chill out when the trumpets get excited. Okay. Or when the trombones blast pretty hard. So I have a 2-to-1 ratio on the mids. It's just slightly going on that. It's almost like I've got 4 sections of a song going right here, right? I got my bass, mid, and then mid, high, and high parts to them. So I'm just trying to chill those trumpets out a touch because they were just a little too pokey. But I didn't want them when they were playing quiet. I didn't want to affect it at all. See, that's the nice thing about this. I don't want I want as little effect in the song as possible. I'm just trying to rescue those really loud parts. Questions on that? Is this helping? Is this cool? All right. So that was my first tool that I went into. Oops. Go back to. The next issue that I wanted to do was figure out how, I guess maybe I'd done the other one first, was to get my levels on my mics about right. And I keep going back and forth. Let's see if we can hear on these speakers the difference between the Neumanns and the ribbons. So let's see here. I guess we want some. So these are the Neumanns. They're brighter and more present. And then the ribbons. Oh, you can't hear it, right? Hear the difference? Big difference, right? Let me go back. Now, of course, what I want is all the high crispiness of the condenser Neumann mics without the harshness. In a ribbon mic, I want the smoothness without the harshness, but I want it brighter, so then I end up mixing the two. And I had originally gone a little higher with the ribbon mics, and then I ended up bringing the Neumanns back up, and you'll see now the levels. Neumanns are a little bit higher. A little bit higher. Okay? On these speakers, it's a little crispy. A little crispy. These speakers absolutely suck, though. Right? Not ones you'd want to use. And then I also balanced the left and right. You'll see I had to turn the left side up a little bit. I just decided, I want it to be even left and right. I can't get into whether it's the trombones or the saxes, they're loud, whatever. I can't even tell what's going on, really. So I did that next. And then I wanted to get the bass going. So let's just go back. So this is the bass mic. I know when I record a room full of instruments, there's going to be lots of mid-range, boomy, echoey stuff and not a lot of low homfa, right? Because there's going to be less reverberation on that. When the low bass note hits that back wall, it just goes right through it. It doesn't come back. Thank God, otherwise the room would sound all boomy, right? All boomy. So I know I need to add a little bass. So what did I do with this bass? I did my favorite things. Got the exciter and the sub bass on it. Okay, so the EQ is here just again for the analyzer, and I'll show you what I did with the bass. So I've got the bass going. Actually, that's not a bad place to listen. The most important part of the bass is not the bass notes, but the high notes, right? And you'll see by direct, that's the other thing I can get by DIing it. I can get the sound of that string being bowed across there, right? So I've got some of these high frequencies. So first thing I do is like, yeah, let me bring out those high frequencies. I just add the exciter on there. Here's the exciter on. There it is off. Wait, turn it off for a second. Here's on. And I can crank it up here. Hear all that high end? Okay. So I'm able to bring the high end up without using EQ. So it's not affecting the low end. I'm adding frequencies over it. Now, what sounds good on these speakers is quite a bit more. That's the sound I'm looking for. That's what I needed on these speakers, because these speakers have no high end on them either. Okay, no high or low. But I know when I listened on the good speakers that I only wanted about that much. And it's bringing out the bowing sound. You can really hear it there, right? That bow. Okay, that's going to give us some clarity. And the first thing I did on all of them was that the bass drum, the bass, the timpani. I added high end on them all just to give them some more clarity, right? And so you'll see an exciter across all of them right there. Okay. Then I wanted low. Now I doubt we can hear the sub bass here, but we could see it. Let's watch right here. I'll turn the sub bass off. And you'll see that it's lower down here, around 50 hertz. I'll add it back on. Right there, see how off. Much less, right? And again, you can't hear it here, but you can't hear it at all. It's all way below what's going on with this thing. But I added that low bass in. This was ridiculous at this point. It had too much high and too much low, but that's okay because I knew that was coming from the mix was a lot of this mid stuff in here, and it would fill it out. And then I brought that bass in. Now, the other part I did was, because this bass is unnatural now, it's not part of the room, it's not interacting with the other frequencies, it is going in direct, that I wanted to control that so it was not bouncing out of the mix when he plays loud or soft. So I had to compress it a little bit, and what did I do there? I went into the compressor, I went and picked FET bass as the default, and I set it from 3 to 5 decibels of reduction, just like we always do. That was really easy. Just keeps it under control. If you hear now, it's more consistent. Each note. Remember a second ago it was a little harder to hear each note. Now what it's doing is squashing the high ones, and because I have auto gain on here, it's bringing up the lower ones, the lower frequencies. Questions? Questions on that? Still good? I did the exact same thing for the, let's see, right here you can see I did the exact same thing for the timpanis and the bass drum. I tried to put the sub bass in the timpani, but I found it wasn't helpful because the timpani was next to the bass drum and it just added more boom from the bass drum. So the timpanis, oddly enough, weren't too much. All right, all right, so then I went on to the bass drum. Well, this thing's a pain in the rear, right? Let me see if I can find where it's hitting. It's really annoying when you have an instrument that doesn't play very often, and when it does, it's really important, okay? And the bass drum is a perfect example of that. Sat there the whole song, not doing anything, and then it's just going to go, right? Blow out the speakers, blow our ears out. We all know what that sounded like when it started, right? So let me just, yeah, like that? Turn these off. This is what it sounded like originally. This is the sound of that mic on that bass drum through these wonderful speakers we have here. That's pretty similar to how it sounds from this. Let's see. Right, it's kind of woody. So I heard this and I was like, this is not much of an improvement. This isn't, I'm not sure I just add this for the sake of adding it. But what did I want to do? I wanted to do the same thing. I wanted to get some high end and some low end on it. Well, so the first thing I did is I went in and put the EQ on so I could have a reference point again. I'm looking at the sound and I see that most of it is right here, right around 100 hertz. I know that 100 hertz is a pretty high bass sound. If you want bass in your song, that's where the fundamental notes are of some of the bass notes, but most of the time when we feel it, you got to be down around a 60 hertz. They used to say in the 80s like 80. 80's too high, I think. 60 to even 50 or 40 hertz is probably the best area. You want some sound. So I knew I wanted some down lower here below this. Well, that's what the sub bass is for. I added sub bass, and there it is. Look at that difference. Okay. Now, when I first put in the sub bass, the mix was about like this, right? And if I was doing just this bass drum, one of the things that you'll learn is that you generally want your equalizer to look like that, higher at the bottom and gradually go down. Your whole song should look like that. Most instruments with a low fundamental frequency look like that. So I knew this was about the right look, and it sounds about right on good speakers. We can't hear any of that right now. We can't hear anything below this. But what was happening is I'm mixing it back with that really MIDI nasty sound that's on the overhead mics, right? The one that we had already crushed. So I was like, I actually need to have a ridiculous amount of bass on this and almost none of the original signal in. So when I ended up like that. We can't hear it. Okay? When that plays on big speakers, you can feel it in your chest, right? And you see it's down around, I'm aiming for 60 to 50 hertz right there, okay? I'm using the subwoofer to do that. I'm taking out most of the dry signal. Well, now that I've done that, I've also taken out the crack of it, so let me add some exciter, which on these speakers is all we hear now. And now I've reshaped that signal to have low and high that I can add in around the sound that's coming from the overhead mics. Yeah?
So you want the crack?
Very much. Very much. Very much. Yeah. The crispness, the high end is the most important part of the bass, of bass notes. It's the weirdest thing. It seems counterintuitive. But because those low frequencies take so long to get going, the speaker moves slow to get it moving. It sounds like mud unless you give your ear a nice click, and then your ear can literally retroactively, psychoacoustically assign that click sound with that low sound, and it sounds like it's got punch. So when people talk about getting punch in the bass or punch in the drums, at high end, right? And I think the exciter is the best way to do it. I've found. I might have just totally psyched myself out of EQ. I swear to God, though, whenever I put it on, I'm like, it doesn't sound as good. I put a little bit on this. I think I took it off. I tried, and yeah, I took it off. I had it right here in the master. I tried adding just very subtle EQs, and I was like, yeah, it might just be that I don't like the color of the things or something, but in my mind, it's like, like
Without EQ is not a bad thing.
right. The less you do it with, the better, right? The less you can use. Yeah.
So basically, when you did to the bass drum signal, you cut out like the muddiness per se.
Yeah.
That's what you kind of digging
Well, basically, I use this bass drum mic as a signal generator for a synthesizer, and the synthesizer is the sub bass and the exciter. Does that make sense? It's basically my oscillator to get it started. And then I'm adding some oscillators below it, low frequencies, and I'm adding distortion or high frequencies up above it. And I'm almost taking out all, if you look at this here, the original signal, I'm only letting 20% of it through. And then I'm adding that to the mix from the overheads as a way to make that move. Because I can't fight that. The amount of bass drum that's in the overheads, I can't fight. It's taking over so much. I can't reshape that sound. I can only kind of add around it. Yeah. Yeah. I've squished it as much as I can. Now I'm trying to add above and below it. Yep. So this took me way too much of my weekend right there. Okay. Timpanis, similar. Let's see if we got some timpanis going here. The timpanis sound pretty awesome. Yeah, go ahead.
You put one mic on there? Or so when you
I had one mic in between each of the two there's 4 timpanis. I had one mic on the left 2 and one mic on the right 2. Yeah. What's that? They were the MD 421s. They're Sennheiser black. They're usually used on toms, on drums. So that's why I thought, oh, maybe they'll be good on this. If I could go back, I would have put 2 ribbon mics that would have been bidirectional in between, so they would have picked up both more evenly. Yeah.
So I know we were talking about during the concert, cycling through like different sound systems, like maybe shitty earbuds and then
Yeah.
good stuff. Like,
Yeah.
How often did you do that during the process?
Well, I have really good headphones. My ears are really well trained, and I have really good speakers, and I have a really good listening environment. So I only change it up about every 10 minutes. Maybe 15. If I was working on something specific, like squishing that kick or squishing that bass drum when it was too loud, I was just focused on that one thing. I wasn't trying to mix. Like, how do I solve that one problem? And then I pop out and listen to the whole thing. But when I do that, I have to change the listening environment. Yeah, because my ears have adapted. The most amazing one was that I'd use those headphones and then I put on my iPhone headphones. It was like not even close. I mean, it didn't even sound like the same song. Yeah.
you said only 10 minutes. Is it supposed to be?
If I had a worse listening environment, I'd spend less time on them.
So what?
Because what happens if I'm working on those headphones, I'm working on my iPhone headphones, pretty soon I am mixing for the headphones. Like there's too much mud in there. Well, yeah, it's because the headphones are producing too much mud, not because the original signal was. So then I carve out all that in my song, and I get my song sound right on those iPhone headphones, and really what I've done is tuned the headphones. And then I go to the other headphones, and it's like all bright.
So you're just compensating on what you're using.
I'm trying to make sure I don't spend a lot of time, because your ears will very quickly want to fix the problem.
Okay. So then how
You know-
quickly would you change it?
What's that?
How quickly would you change from one?
The worse the listening environment, the quicker I'd change it. That makes
Well,
sense?
I mean, like how much time would you take? 3 minutes, 2 minutes?
For me, I can start to feel now when I'm becoming less objective. It's when I start tweaking little things and going in, like when I start doing this, when I start going, maybe it should be 4 milliseconds. Yeah, right there. Now I am going in too far. I am going too far. Yeah. If I'm getting into these little tweaky, geeky things where my brain is getting fascinated with the numbers rather than my ears and my heart listening to the song, I'm too far. So like I said, I go default. I put it on the defaults, do quick tweaks. This is as surgical as I've ever been. This is as surgical as I'd ever be, because I'm pretty close to saying, you know what, that's the way the recording sounds. You know, I can't make this sound like a different recording. This is what was recorded. It's like tough. So this is as surgical as I'd ever want to be. If I was recording a session intentionally, I would never have recorded it like this, so that I wouldn't have. This is taking me longer than if we'd recorded it right. So timpanis, what I found was that I just added a little bit of exciter. I can probably show you that. So that's with the exciter off and on. It's a little crisper. Off, on. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me pop back to the bass drum. I'm sorry. So the other part, because I'm now doing all this weird stuff with the bass drum, I didn't want those other sounds coming through. So I put a gate on it. And a gate is, remember, it reduces the sound below. So now the gate only comes on when the kick hits. Okay? Okay. This gate is very confusing, but it's got the threshold. If I raise the threshold up, it never comes on. If I raise the threshold down, it never turns off. So I've got to find that point in between. There it is. I don't want it to accidentally come on, and I don't want it to miss any notes. So I also had to set, this is called the monitor part right here. This says, you know what, listen to these frequencies. And I said, you know what, don't listen to any of the high frequencies if you're going to determine whether to come on. Roll off all the high so you're only hearing the bass. We can't hear it now, unfortunately. But when it's deciding whether to open the bass drum, it's only listening to the low frequencies right here, like that. And so it's reacting to that. And this sounds horrible, doesn't it? The other thing I had to do was add a little bit of compression onto it because some of the hits were too loud. And what did I do? I went in and I picked rock kick, and I adjusted it so there was 0 to... In some places, they hit a little harder. Less than 5 decibels of reduction, just to keep certain notes from being too loud. I did the same thing with the timpanis. I used optotoms. And you see, I've got a little bit more compression on the timpani there. Let's see if we can hear it. Go back to the timpani. There are different, if you see all these up here, there are different types of compressors. Opto means it was done with a light. VCA FET, I don't even know what they all mean. But I thought it sounded cool. So let me turn this on and off and see if we can hear it. And then off. That's... Ideally, it wouldn't be making that much... It does make that much difference. So what's happening there is by crushing the initial signal, it's bringing up the rest of it. It sounds much louder even though it's not hitting. And that brings out the notes of the kettle drum in the mix more. So there's this doom, doom. That becomes the bass note in the mix a lot. So that's pretty extreme compression right there. It's aiming for 3 to 5 though. You can see, right? A couple of those notes were too loud. If I take that compression down, I lose the note. Right, there's too much compression. Can you hear that? It's sucking. It's making a sucking feeling. It's like, if I go right about here, right about there, I got a lot of the ringing note. This is what I've learned. The timpanis are great bass notes when you have small speakers. Like, listen to that, right? It sounded like a full bassy sound. It wasn't. Because we know the speakers can't produce any bass, but it sure sounded like it, didn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
I'm wondering,
besides the auto gain, is there like a way to automate it so that it'll ride up and down? I guess not.
Yeah, well, you have two things that you can do. There's lots of things you do with the compressor, but two primary things. One is cap off the ridiculously loud stuff. Two is smooth out the ongoing stuff. And it's very hard to have it smooth out the ongoing stuff and then not freak out when you hit the really loud stuff, right? And so I actually had toyed with that a bit. I'll show you my solution to that in just a second. But I wish there was a compressor that just said, look ahead 100 milliseconds and follow the song and just provide a consistent little softening on everything. And then when the song gets louder, just soften that. Right? But the way the compressor works is it doesn't. Once you set that threshold, it would be a dynamic threshold is what you'd want.
I found myself thinking, though, of when it gets really loud, maybe you don't want to, and when everything gets really loud, maybe you don't want to compress it so much as when you get into where it's a little quiet.
Right. Yeah, you might even want to reverse. Yeah, exactly. I know. Yeah. No, that was exactly what I wanted for this song. It doesn't exist that I know of, unfortunately. So, okay, so the other questions on those. All right, before I get over to the master channel, then I decided to add some reverb. Well, how do you do that? Right here, when I sent, these are called sends right here. This is the output of the channel strip. It had gone to the stereo output. But here, if you click on these sends, this is something you guys haven't seen yet, I can pick a bus to send it to. And when you pick a bus to send it to, oh, I just picked bus 9. It creates bus 9 here. Okay. I wanted to send everything to the reverb. So I wanted a whole bunch of things, you'll see right here, sent to bus 2. I sent the bass. I sent the electric bass, the bass drum, the timpanis, and the applause that I had brought in, the fake applause, and all the overhead mics. Because when I recorded this song, I recorded it pretty dry. We weren't in the room. Remember, there was no mics in the distance in the room. That's how it sounds. I added this reverb. Very long reverb. How did I find this reverb? I went in here. They have a very nice one called Space Designer, which is my favorite. They'll probably update it pretty soon, Space Designer, right here. And I went in and I picked Large Hall. I hit play. Now, when I picked Large Hall, it was a little long. It was a 3.5 second decay, so I changed the envelope on it right here. I shortened it. I didn't want it quite that long. I could really shorten it. Very short there, right? Or I could make it longer. Right? And I found that I was liking that longer decay. I mixed it in at kind of a low level because we do have a lot of that room sound from the space already. But I thought it needed something bright under it. And here. Now when I hear it on these speakers, I think it's a little. Oh, that's not bad. If I turn it off, hear the difference there? It's off. Here it comes back in. My basic rule of thumb with reverb is similar to compression, right at the point where you can start to hear it. Is that how low can I have the reverb and still have it be effective? Now, I ended up automating the reverb a little bit because I was playing it back and I was playing this song. Can't even hear it. And I accidentally had the reverb really high. And it sounded beautiful on the flute. But then when I went and played one of the loud percussive songs, the reverb was too loud. So I went in and I automated the amount of reverb so that it would be less on this track. Right here, you'll see that I cranked the reverb up from -10 to -7. So -7, there's more reverb on this one song right here, on this one song. And so I just went in. Remember, I didn't automate the level volume because I still wanted to be able to tweak the reverb as I listened. But I went in Space Designer and I automated the output of the reverb. You can't quite see that there, sorry. Because I liked that reverb. Right? Sounds good on. Especially the end of the song. She does these beautiful. Right? That reverb sounds good, doesn't it? Okay, so I wanted the reverb higher in that song, so I did some automation there. And then the reverb is going to the stereo out. So we've got all these ones going to bus 2, these sends, these are called sends, going to bus 2, which is now here. I put a reverb on it, and then it goes from bus 2 to the main output. We still doing good?
So by doing it that way, you then have both the dry signal and the...
This is my wet-dry mix. This is my wet-dry mix right here. Because this reverb, when I insert it here, it's all wet. You'll see that there's no dry. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I control the wet-dry mix here with the fader.
But
This,
the dryer will still be there.
the dry is coming from all the other strips. And I can. That's how she sounds normally? This is with the reverb.
I'm just sitting there thinking about this, about the extent to which it'll come to sound like there's more than one instrument.
Well, because this is reverb, it's coming after she plays, it will always sound like her playing. You're always going to hear the initial sound as the source. Even if the reverb is louder. At this point, the reverb is louder than her. But you still hear her voice. Yeah. Yeah. Yes?
So the reverb that you added, the Space Designer, that's like a brighter one, right?
Yes, it's a very bright reverb.
It's like way more apparent than the reverb that was actually the natural reverb that was.
Exactly. It's a very bright, good point. It's a very bright reverb because there was already enough boomy, woomy, woom sound going on in all the instruments playing and bouncing around in that kind of small space for an orchestra that size. Yeah. And so I wanted that high crispiness to give it that sense of warmth and life without getting muddy. Yep.
It's just occurring to me it won't amplify the sound because I'm thinking analog and there being delay when you do that. It won't happen with this.
No.
Digital.
No, it's all after. Yep. Yeah.
So what's the difference between the sends and the output?
Okay, so good question from Andrew on the difference between output and sends. This is a channel strip right here, and this will be in our lecture in 4 weeks. But here it is. This is the bass. The bass is playing. It came in on input 1. I ran it through these effects. Then it gets sent out to the stereo output. If I put the bass here to no output, we now hear no bass. Okay, I'm playing it right there. Let me just switch back over here. Or we do, somehow. Oh, because it's coming through the bus. Okay, so now there's no sound coming from the bass. If I want to hear the bass, I have to send it out the output that I'm listening to, which right now is the stereo out. The only reason you'd want to have a different output would be you had surround sound or something like that. Okay, in this case. Now, I want to send this reverb. I don't want to have to create a different reverb. I could put the reverb on the channel right here. I could go here. I could go down to, where is it, reverb, right? And put it on. But I don't want to put a different reverb on each channel. And then if I decide to change the reverb, I have to go to each one and change it. Does that make sense? So I created a new bus by clicking this, and I went and I picked bus 2. It didn't say reverb. I named it that later. When I picked bus 2, it created this channel strip here automatically for me. Does that make sense? So it is, and then I can send from this reverb to that channel strip. Now I could still kill the output. Watch, no output from the bass, but you still hear it, don't you? Because now the signal is coming through here, through these effects. It's going to this send. It's going over here to this bus input, going through this reverb, and then going to the stereo out. So what we hear right there is the reverbed bass. But we don't hear the direct bass because this channel strip is not going to the out. I would need to send that to the output. that allows me now to do a submix. A send is basically a submix where I can route all these channel strips, some portion of them, to that send too. So they're all going through the same reverb on their way to the output. A submix. Effects sends, sub bus. Those are all terms we would use for that.
So basically, when you're trying to use the bus in order to create a submix, when you're trying to do that, it's basically you're getting certain effects that you don't want to just go through all the other tracks to put onto.
Anything I want to do to a collection of tracks that I won't have to redo across all of them,
So
a bus is the way to do it.
so in theory, would you be able to just use that one as like a completely, well not completely new track, but use that one just to like stack maybe 4 or 5 different type of effects onto the different tracks if you didn't want them to, if you didn't want to have to go back and put them onto each one?
Yep, anywhere I want to do something to the multiple tracks. So I've done 2 different buses here. The first one is the effects send bus. What this means is I can send some portion of it. So if I go back to this reverb here, to no output, that's the reverb going to the bass. I can increase the amount of bass going to the reverb by turning up this. This is a send level. More bass going to the reverb? None. This allows me to set different amounts of reverb to the different tracks. But they all go to the same reverb. And then I control all the reverb with this fader. That's the point in a send right there. It's the main thing you'll do with the send. The other thing you'll do with the send is if you want a cue mix for somebody, if they're listening back and you want to send them a different mix than is coming out your mains, you could send a different output. You could send a little more guitar to the guitarist or a little more voice to the voice. Yeah.
So I know for the software that I run at home, if there's like too much CPU being used, that it's gonna start making the tracks sound laggy. So how would
Well, back in the day, we couldn't have a bunch of reverb on the tracks. We could only have one because of the CPU. And now, because there's more CPU, we could have a different reverb on each track, but it's just a pain at that point. And back in the analog days, you only had one reverb module. You might have spent $1,500 on this reverb module. You had to send everything to it. But you didn't want to send everything through it. You wanted a little bit of bass, a lot of guitar, a lot of voice, and tiny bit of drums. So you wanted to control those levels separate that you're sending the reverb. That's what the send would do.
so like with that like make it to where you're using less of the CPU?
Yes, because I've only got one instance of the reverb plugin. And reverb plugins will eat up the most CPU of anything. A good reverb. I would suggest not having more than one reverb on your track, maybe 2, but use delays outside of that. If you're having a bunch of reverbs, it starts to just muddy the space, and you have all these reverb tails going over each other, and you can't hear the individual ones. You can't hear the individual ones. Right? So the other place, going back to Andrew's thing here, the other place that you would want to use a bus is on the outputs itself. Because here, I routed all these mics to the bus 1 just so I can control, where is it here? Bus 1, I can control the level of it. And I can put a multipressor across all of it. Multipressor is different than reverb. I don't want any direct signal going in a multipressor. I want to compress the whole signal. Reverb, I want some reverb, but not everything reverbed. So I can control the level of reverb here, and I can run these effects across the whole bus. Another time you might route your outputs to a bus is, say you've got a choir and you've got 10 mics up on the choir, right? But you want to turn up and down the whole choir? Well, you route them all to a bus, and then you have one master fader there, and then you can mix in the other instruments around that. Yeah?
So you recommend the Space Designer as a good reverb?
Yeah. Space Designer is the best one in Logic.
Yay.
Still. Although I'll bet this, I didn't try, this is their new, actually now I might go back on that. Their new Platinum Verb, right?
Yeah.
That's the oh no, not that one. The N verb. I haven't worked with this enough, but I'm assuming because this is more recent, they probably have used a lot of the Space Designer techniques in this one. It's just a simplified interface. So that might work too. So we can get back to that reverb. Other questions? Get back to my hall here. Large spaces, halls. think it was that one.
Layer of the Lion King.
Looks about right. I brought the release down a little bit. There's something like that I had. Okay, let's get over to this master. So now I've got all these channels going to the main. I've got the mics going to the main, and I've got the reverb going to the main. This aux 3 doesn't exist. It just looks like it. There, it's gone. What did I want to do in the main? Well, I wanted a little bit of compression on everything because just a little flute note or a little hit here was kind of poking out. I knew I wanted it as loud as possible, so I threw an ad limiter at the end, and I threw this compressor on. Yes?
Before you go any further, do you recommend top-down mixing, like throwing light plugins on there?
Throwing what?
Top-down mixing, starting from the master bus, then moving your way through the tracks?
I probably did this master. Yes, I probably put this ad limit. I don't know if I could say. The question is whether I did top-down mixing, meaning put these on first and then this.
Yeah, that's essentially it.
I think I probably did, to be honest here, the stereo mics. Messed with some of this and came over here pretty quick. No, I think I probably did about like I'm doing. I'm pretty ready to move here, but this probably would have taken me. I did not spend much time on this multipressor. I didn't spend a lot of time on these things. I just kind of picked them out. Now I'm going to move over here quickly, and I'm going to kind of do top down now. Let me get to my adaptive limiter here. I need to get some kind of level on it. I can't put a compressor on the master without having a level. So this has to go after. That can't do that first. So I guess I can't really do top down because I have to have an appropriate level going here. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I probably threw on this ad limiter at the end here pretty quickly with 3 decibels of gain usually. You'll see there's only 2 there, but there's a reason for that. Then I came with this compressor, and I was running into the problem that Doug brought up, which was it's going to compress the really loud stuff and have no effect on the quiet stuff. And what I wanted was more of a consistent effect on some of the quiet stuff and some of the loud stuff. So I actually started automating the threshold for a while, and then I got really annoyed with that. Okay. Lowering the threshold when the sound was lower, raising the threshold when the sound was louder. It was too annoying. I decided that all I could do was add a second ad limiter before it and totally crush that big bass drum and the cymbals when they came through. So I've done it once on the multipressor. Now I've added to it my bass drum track separately after the multipressor, and I'm going to compress the heck out of it again, limit the heck out of it again. And let me see if I can show you what that looks like. This was a pain. I've never had to resort to this kind of violent approach to mixing before. See if I can get some of those loud bass drums. Oh, I think I got some loud ones right here. Okay, here we go. Actually, it's kind of hard to hear those because the tom. Okay, those ones are really offensive. So I put an adaptive limiter. Oops, sorry. I've never done this. I put an adaptive limiter before the compressor in hopes that I can prevent the compressor from going absolutely nuts on the bass. So if I hit that normally, you can't really see it, but it was too much, so I hacked off the top of that. When I do this, I've just increased the gain by 4 decibels, okay? I brought the out ceiling down a little bit because I'm actually shaping this limiter coming before the compressor for the compressor, is exactly what Doug's talking about. I didn't want it so loud that the compressor was only picking up the very top. So I wanted to come out a little bit quieter so my compressor had some room to work with. I'm not coming in at the maximum level. I wanted to hack off about 4 decibels. How did I pick that up? I watched this and I said, nothing should move here. This shouldn't change at all except for when the bass drum hits. Nothing, nothing. There it is. And I found I could get 3 to 4 decibels of reduction before other things started to get affected by it. This is totally squashing the sound there. I'm giving up the impact of the bass drum, and I'm saying, okay, that's just the way it's going to be. It's still quite a bit louder. Then I went into the compressor, and I was like, well, now that I've brought in these different tracks, I've diced up these tracks by separating low, mid-high, and high. I want something to kind of tie this all, to smooth this out a little bit. It was just a little crispy. It was just a little like pokey. And so I know that's what the other function of compressor is. So I picked Platinum Orchestral from here. And I went in and I set a very low ratio of 1.2 to 1. And originally, it had a knee about here. And you'll see when I hit play, it's moving there, but you saw it move quite a bit on the kick drum. But what was happening is it was compressing a lot on the really loud notes and not at all on the quiet notes. And I was like, I just used limiters for that. I just used a bunch. So I wanted more of a smooth sound, so I took this knee right here, and I moved the knee all the way up. I had to look up in the manual what a soft knee was. So soft knee is 1. What does that soft knee mean? It means it starts compressing below the threshold a little bit, so that when it gets to the threshold, it's at full level. It's got a smooth increase in the ratio, as opposed to no compression, full compression. Right? Hard knee is a click over. The soft knee is smooth. What does that mean? It means it starts doing some compression below the threshold, and as it gets to the threshold, it's gradually increasing it, but not killing it. And you'll see now that the needle is going to move much smoother, even on this loud part of the song. Whoops. The needle's almost... I think I just... And even if I back up now to a quieter part of the song, I can't get it there. I've got no compression on that. But pretty soon here, you'll see it start to move it. You see it moving that needle? If I had that as a hard knee, no compression, and then a ton, right? It went from no compression to a ton. I didn't want that. I wanted it a little bit smoother, so I wanted the smoother. Does that work? I don't really know. Can I hear it? I don't really know. I really don't. It seems like a good idea, though, so I did it. I'm not sure that compressor is worth it. I'm not sure the compressor is worth it. So then after I came out of the compressor, I put my final adaptive limiter on here. I got another 2 decibels of gain, and I called it good. And that's the mix. And here I'll just play. I'll go ahead and pause the recording, and I'll play one of the songs for you so you can hear.